In 1962, Marilyn agreed to perform at JFK's 45th birthday gala in New York. Marilyn ordered a dress for the event, which would also be televised.
People they're mesmerized by seeing it. It makes people cry. Very few artifacts in our lifetime has that type of effect on the public.
Bob Mackey was part of Marilyn's design team.
She wanted to look unbelievable. She wanted to really, wake people up. Here's a sketch of the actual dress. It was one layer of very sheer silk fabric. I mean, sheer. They called it in Hollywood, they called it souffle. And then there was thousands of what they call lock rosens, which are like little crystal rhinestones that have a flat back and a hole in the middle and sewn on one at a time. And they're very expensive at this point in time. And it was kind of based on that idea that Marilyn would be absolutely nude and with just diamonds on her as she walked out.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. President. Happy birthday to you.
Marilyn's rendition lasted less than 30 seconds, but the song and the dress had just the effect she'd planned.
It caused a sensation. Lots of people to this day who haven't seen any Marilyn Monroe film have seen that footage of her singing Happy Birthday in the dress that one historian described as skin and beads.
I can now retire from politics after having had Happy Birthday sung to me. Such a sweet, wholesome rap.
It's just America, the land of the free and the home of the brave.
People want to prohibit people from having free and uncovered access because that means that power and resources will then be redistributed. And then who will that favor? And so there's this fear that's behind all of this.
In the segregated South, an organized effort keeps Black citizens from the ballot box.
Residency requirements, poll taxes, literacy requirements.
The very real threat of violence, of lynching, were visited upon communities who did try to exercise the right to vote, which was why there are vast communities where people didn't even attempt to try to vote.
One woman brings the struggle to the national stage. Fannie Lou Hamer was born the last of 20 children to a family of Mississippi sharecroppers.
Growing up in the Mississippi Delta, she thinks, well, voting could help change my economic circumstances, and so I am going to try and go and register to vote.
She isn't allowed to register. Just for attempting it, she is fired from her job of 18 years and put out of her home. But she persists, becoming a voter and an activist.
The bus that she's in gets stopped, and all of the people who are with her who are trying to register to vote, they are removed from the bus.
Once again, women asking for their democratic rights are thrown in jail.
3 white men came to my cell. One of these men was State Highway Patrol. He said, "We're going to make you wish you was dead."
She is physically assaulted to the point that that assault has lifelong effects on her.
This time, there is no public outcry. President Johnson pays no attention. But Hamer does not back down. Instead, she launches a campaign for the U.S. Senate. Though the longest of long shots in a district where only 5% of African Americans are registered to vote, she uses the platform to raise her voice.
We are sick and tired of being sick and tired.
In 1964, Hamer speaks at the National Democratic Party convention in Atlantic City.
We want to register to become first-class citizens. And if the freedom...
She told the story of what was happening to Black people in their quest for their natural-born right to vote.
It's this America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our telephones off of the hook because our lives be threatened daily, because we want to live as decent human beings in America.
She used her platform to tell a story that I don't think many people in the nation knew.
She recognized that if the South was going to change, it was going to change at the hands of people like her.
1 year later, Congress passes a law to enforce the 19th and 15th Amendments, the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
As much as we want the story of voting rights, not just for women, but for everyone in the United States, to be a forward trajectory, there are always new barriers that people find ways to put up.
August 7th, 1997. Fine Air Cargo Flight 101 prepares to take off from Miami to the Dominican Republic. At 12:30 p.m., when Flight 101 taxis to its runway, First Officer Petrosky recites a familiar drill.
Okay, standard Fine Air procedure. If there's a problem prior to V1, which is 130 knots, the pilot in command will abort the airplane. Treat anything after V1 as an in-flight emergency.
Sounds good.
At 12:34, the tower makes contact.
Fine Air 101, fly heading 270, cleared for takeoff.
Clear takeoff 27 right. Fine Air 101 heavy.
Okay, force spooled and stable. Max power.
Okay, coming up on 60 knots, power set. 80. V1, rotate.
The plane lifts off the runway.
Okay, easy, 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 easy.
You're up.
The air traffic controller is alarmed by what he now sees.
What's going on?
Whoa, whoa.
The crew fights to get the plane under control.
Too low, gear. Too low. Too low, terrain. Too low, terrain. Pull up.
No!
Where's your emergency? Yes, there's been a plane crash at 72nd and 25th.
It's the unthinkable. A plane crash in the heart of Miami. The plane's 3-man crew and security guard are confirmed dead.
In 1908, Michigan's Henry Ford, son of an Irish immigrant, embarks on an audacious mission, creating what he calls a motor car for the multitude. His Model T sells for $850, around $23,000 today. Ford is a master of the publicity stunt. These are rare images. Auto Polo in New York City. The games promote Model T sales, which hit 10,000 cars in the first year. To reduce costs, Ford pioneers mass production and cuts deals with other captains of industry, like Ohio's Harvey Firestone. In 1900, the one-time buggy salesman risks his own money, $10,000, to set up a rubber tire factory in Akron. He starts making pneumatic tires, inflated with air, that gives cars a smoother ride on the country's rough roads. In 1906, Henry Ford recognizes their quality after a 60-day test drive on the streets of Detroit. He buys 8,000 in what is the biggest tire deal to date, paying the equivalent of $2.8 million today. Firestone and Ford are following in the footsteps of the previous generation of industrialists.
Washington, D.C., 1970. Suffragists peacefully picketing the White House. When an angry mob of men closes in, it's the women who are arrested.
These women are beaten, they're tortured.
Today, it seems incredible that only a century ago, American women had no voice in democracy. And it took almost that long to win the vote. But pull back the curtain, and you discover what the struggle for voting rights is really about.
It's about power and about this long trajectory of people really vying for their place at this table.
When America was founded, more people could vote here than anywhere else in the world. It just happened to be a fraction of our population.
We the people is only loosely defined in the Constitution. Women are never mentioned, and the framers left voting rights up to each state. In most places, voting was exclusive to property-owning white men, just 6% of the population. Legally, women weren't really people at all.
September 1939. War has broken out in Europe, and the Nazis are threatening to invade France. They have also declared war on modern art. They display a selection of confiscated works at the Degenerate Art Exhibition to demonstrate the supposed moral decay of modernism. Some paintings are destroyed. Some are sold off cheap to foreign dealers. Peggy Guggenheim won't deal with the Nazis. She's in Paris, buying art directly from the artists.
Artists were flocking to her because they knew what would happen if their art got into Nazi hands. This was a safe haven for their art. She's a Jew, but she stayed in Paris. Very brave woman.
By spring 1940, as the Nazis invade France, Peggy is buying a painting a day, many from artists who will become household names.
Her mission was to collect these pictures, and that's what she was doing single-mindedly.
Peggy buys over 50 works, some for just a few $100s. Today, that collection is priceless. Nearly 30 years later, she will recall saving these artworks from the Nazis.
I had to get them out of Paris before the Germans came, and I sent them to a chateau of a friend, and the Germans came and went. They didn't even know the cases were there in a barn.
Peggy has got the artworks out of Paris, but just 2 days before the Germans enter the city, she is still there. In the nick of time, she escapes to the south of France. There she starts yet another affair, this time with artist Max Ernst. By 1941, the French authorities are rounding up Jews in France. Peggy is in danger, and so is her collection.
I wouldn't leave until I got the pictures out. I was very lucky. A man arranged the whole thing for me and sent the whole thing to New York as household objects. Sheets and blankets and casseroles.
Once the collection is smuggled out of the country, Peggy makes her own escape.
She and Max Ernst, her ex-husband Lawrence Vail, and his new wife, and 7 children belonging to various couples, all traveled to Lisbon, where they got a Pan Am Clipper, a flying boat, which took 2 days to take them to New York.
Peggy and Max marry, and the following year she opens a gallery in Manhattan, Art of This Century, showcasing the cubist, abstract, and surrealist artwork she rescued from Europe. It is a sensation.
Peggy opens her gallery and the press goes wild.
She really had the world at her feet at that stage.
Over the next few years, Peggy puts on a series of trailblazing exhibitions, the first all-woman show in the United States, featuring artists such as Dorothea Tanning and Frida Kahlo.
When Peggy opened Art of This Century, there were only a handful of galleries showing American art, and even fewer, perhaps, showing contemporary American art. She was the midwife of these wonderful movements, and I do believe without her, things might not have developed in quite the same way.
Hugh Tallman is a staff photographer for the Smithsonian's Museum of American History. It's his job to document, with photographs, objects that represent some of the most pivotal events in our country's history. Artifacts rescued from the rubble of the Twin Towers on 9/11, like this flag. Objects left behind after Hurricane Katrina ravaged the Gulf Coast in 2005.
My experience of Katrina is a lot more intimate than it would have been if I never went down there and saw the things I saw and photographed them and recorded them. The first object that really visually hit us was a sign that says, "Have we been forgotten?" Huge plywood sign, and it was the first day we were there.
Tallman's mission was to photograph ordinary objects that would capture a moment and convey the power of this storm.
The strangest thing about the whole experience was just the emptiness. We had gone into this neighborhood and it was deserted. It was just blocks and blocks and blocks of empty houses that had been smashed down to the ground. And all of a sudden, you look down on the ground and there's this clock down there, and you think, how could I photograph this so that people know what went on all around it? It ended up with a shot of the clock in the foreground, and then there was a house. Looks like it had a bite taken out of it.
Curators brought the clock and other items back to the museum. Once they were cleaned and cataloged, Tallman photographed the objects again, this time in the museum's studio.
The reaction that I want people to have from the pictures that I've taken of Katrina would be one of realizing the enormity of the disaster. I'd never seen anything like this at all.